with Brittany saying that she's not the important one and that I am. Now I just feel bad for you guys. Now I can at least see Brittany. Hopefully y'all can put her picture over mine. That way it doesn't scare anybody and anybody's cameras break or so, nothing. So, but my name is Craig Yarbrough. I work here at the Harbin Insurance Agency. I do insurance and bonding for contractors. So I know you guys are excited for another 3.5 hours of insurance talk. That's a joke. We're not going to do that. I'm not going to do that to you guys. I'm not going to torture you in that aspect. But I do want to go over some things. I want to make sure this is as interactive as possible. There is nothing sexy and fun and wonderful about the insurance process. However, I'm going to do my best to make it as fun as interactive as possible, for sure. So, like she said, my name is Craig Yarbrough. My claim to fame is I like to say that my wife is the best sale that I've ever made, and then we have 4 children. The secret is I keep her heavily medicated and she stays with me, and it's great. So, but that's the best thing really, besides my Savior, Lord, and Jesus Christ. That's the best thing that's ever happened to me is my family. So that's my claim to fame. A little bit about me: I grew up in a really small town. My dad was a contractor. My mom owned a different business as well. So I grew up around the entrepreneurial aspect, and I was a very highly touted athlete, played multiple sports in high school, and then ended up playing football at Florida State University. I know there's some Bulldog fans out there, but it's okay because we hate the same people. We both hate Florida. And so I always say my number 1 team is Florida State, and my number 2 team is whoever the Gators are playing. See, James Mahoney, I just feel bad for you. And at this point, and am seriously concerned about your company at this point. So I'm just kidding. There's a place for Gators. I have 2 cousins that played for the Gators, so I was at the Swamp quite a bit. But that's a little bit about me. I got into the insurance industry, and so probably 2012. So I've been in the insurance industry for about 11 years now. And see, I see a Go Dogs there, but feel free to ask questions in this chat, by the way. I want this to be interactive, so that's fine. And so, like I said, I've been in the insurance industry for almost 12 years now. I started out in life and health insurance. I moved over to the PNC side. My entrepreneurial spirit took over, and I actually owned the State Farm agency for 6 years. I was more or less called to the contractor world and business insurance. I fit really well. I like to develop relationships. I like to teach. I like to come alongside of a business owner and to get to where they need to go. It's not as much about the transactional portion for me. It's not about quantity. It's about quality. And I get to do that with what I'm doing now. So I'm very blessed for that as well. So that's a little bit about me. Y'all ain't here for that. Y'all don't care. That's okay. But I would like to start off the presentation with a little question here that I'm going to put up on the screen. Okay. All right, here we go. Let's try it out. All right, can everybody see me okay?
We sure do. If anybody can't see it, just drop it in the chat for me, but I see it just fine.
Are you on the slideshow just fine? Everybody's good, right?
Looks good.
All right, good deal. I can't see the chat, so Brittany, if you need to interrupt me, just interrupt me, okay?
Gotcha. And if you can, everybody, please drop it in the Q&A, just so that I'm looking at one place instead of multiples. If it's discussion amongst you all, comments, then definitely put that in the chat.
All right, very good. Very good. So you see there's a picture of me there. 2 years ago, I was basically roped into a climbing course with Miss Danae Jackson. And a lot of you probably know Miss Danae. and she's such a sweetheart, a little firecracker as well. And so we had a great time. She taught me a lot that day. My extent to tree climbing had been realistically with a tree climber when I'm hunting deer, realistically, and as a kid. But that day I got up probably 35 foot in the air, and it was interesting. So I got a little bit of taste of what you guys do on a daily basis, and I actually enjoyed it, thoroughly enjoyed it, and wanted to kind of immerse myself into that and learn more about it. So that's a picture of me there doing that and having a great time with it. So, all right, here we go. So here's our first question that I would like for you to answer in the Q&A. We're not going to be able to answer everybody's at once, but the first question is with regards to insurance. What is the one thing that you wish you would have known early on? We're talking about you starting a tree company, and hey, I'm gung ho. I know everything there is to know about the tree industry. Let's start a company. What do you wish you would have known about insurance then? We can put that in the Q&A.
Come on, guys, give me. I have a question. Somebody was really on it and gave me a question before.
Okay, let's start with that then. Let's start with that.
All right. Are there any government subsidies or programs to help small businesses make the jump from 1099s to W-2 employees with workers' comp, or a trade association to pool with to get better rates, or financing to help pay the cost over time as opposed to lump sum payments?
So the answer is actually yes when you're at a standard lines company. But if you're at high risk into the risk pool, if you're at that, then there's not any for that. Not in the state of Georgia anyway. So, but if the goal should be with your current agency or whatever, it should be to move you from the high risk pool into a standard lines carrier. And at that point, yes, you can finance your premiums, and there's so many other options. There really is.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, we got lots of good ones coming in now.
All right, good.
If you ever ask that question, if you have follow-up questions, please be sure to drop it in the Q&A. And everybody, I see a bunch coming over in the webinar chat. I'll come to those last, just so that I'm looking at one space. So of course, that question, if you have any further questions, please let us know. Gary wants to know, do I need workers' comp and liability? Gary is a consulting arborist. Of course, Gary, if you want to refine that for Craig anymore, of course, we've got a bunch of people in a bunch of different sectors. So if you ask a question, give us that info so I can help Craig best answer it.
All right, so Gary's a consulting arborist. Does he need workers' comp and general liability? The answer is, as far as legally, workers' comp you have to have if you have 3 or more employees. Okay, so if it's just you, legally you do not have to have it. However, if you get hurt doing that, I would think if you're like anything like me and my family, you would want to have some income coming in if you are injured. Okay, so a lot of people, especially owners, think that if you file a workers' comp claim, it's like suing yourself. No, it's not. It's actually providing a paycheck for your family, and so it's a great program if it's used right. And there's a lot of different avenues that you could take to get to that, as far as it being cost effective as well. General liability, absolutely 100%. You would need your general liability. Okay. There's also we'll talk about certified arborist here in just a little bit. I actually have a slide that we're going to spend some time on certified arborist. So there's absolutely some beef behind that, and we do need to get into that for sure, Gary.
Awesome. Thank you. The next question is how to deal with insurance when trees are actually on the house. Who does he need to get in touch with? This is Evan, who has a tree company, obviously taking
very
tree
good.
Problems.
Yeah, very good question. And there's a lot of that going on. Where our office is at is in Tyrone, and we just had a tornado come through at the beginning of the year in Griffin. So there was a lot of our clients affected by that. So we've had this same situation with a lot of our actually tree clients. We actually insure 26 different tree companies in the state of Georgia. And I don't know if I gave you that background. If we do a lot of high risk contractors in our office, that's what I specialize in, is high risk contractors. So that's a very good question. So the homeowner's insurance is going to pay out that claim if a tree falls on the house. Okay. If it's in regards to they don't have homeowners insurance, then that's not a business insurance answer. That's, hey, bud, did you have homeowners insurance or not? Because at that point they're kind of up the creek without a paddle, realistically. And that's the actual risk that they took, is, hey, do I have insurance or I do not? Insurance is all about risks. And so did they want to take high risk and not have an insurance policy? Then that's what they decided to do.
Awesome. All right. And of course, more questions as we go along
Sure.
towards the end, but I'll move right along. Ingrid wants to know, what is the appropriate lead time to acquire insurance?
Lead time to acquire insurance, meaning like she's starting a company and
I'm assuming, I'm not sure, but I'm assuming basically the time it takes, like from reaching out
oh,
to
okay.
you or somebody else until having that insurance certificate in hand.
Yeah, so that's a great question as well, because sometimes it's going to take a lot longer on the commercial insurance side, especially with tree companies. It's a high risk industry. It's going to take time. Hopefully you're not just going online and clicking through some things and answering, because quite frankly, it would be like me starting a tree company tomorrow. I know a lot about the tree companies because of what I do, and I work a lot with tree companies. However, I'm not a tree expert. And so for me to start a tree company, that wouldn't make a lot of sense because I'm not a tree expert. It's the same concept if you were to go online and pick out your insurance coverages, because realistically you're not an insurance expert. And so the lead time, you can expect anywhere from a couple weeks to a month. That's on the high end. Sometimes if you have an agent that has a really good relationship with underwriters, like I said in our example, we have so many tree companies insured already, so it's kind of a set relationship that we're talking to these underwriters on a weekly basis. So those times are a lot less lag time. You might have a week or 2 week policy as opposed to a month long if you don't have a really great relationship with an underwriter.
Awesome. All right. Moving along. John wants to know, do I need a minimum amount of insurance, or is just any amount of coverage enough?
Very good question, John. We're going to go over that as well. That's one of our slides as well. I love the way your mindsets are already going to this. This is fantastic. This is what I want to do this for. Y'all don't want to hear me sound like Charlie Brown and his teacher. Like I want to make sure that y'all are understanding things. So a minimum amount of insurance. Each company is going to be different, and there is no one size fits all. And I want you to make sure I'm clear on that. There is no one size fits all when it comes to insurance. When a company has 50 employees and is doing 15 million, 10 million in revenue, that their risk looks a whole lot different than the one guy in the truck, and that's it. That's all he has. He has one exposure as opposed to 50 exposures. You see, so there's, I would not ever be an advocate for minimum insurance. And I'll explain why. Because of the claims that we have seen in our office, I would never be an advocate for minimum insurance. However, you can over insure yourself to death. I will be the first person to tell you that. I'm kind of out there as far as the insurance people in the world. I'm not your suit and tie and insurance nerd. I'm one of you guys. That's literally how I grew up. It's a very simple life with contractors. That's kind of how I grew up, and that's kind of how I can talk to you guys. So if that makes any sense, we'll get into that a little bit more, John.
Awesome. All right. Next is, oh, I think this is more of a statement. So the next two
Okay.
are a statement. So the
Okay.
question was, with regards to insurance, what is the one thing that you wish you would have known early on? So please feel free, Craig, to,
Yeah.
add to this.
Okay.
So Robert said workers' comp insurance, that it can cost as much as 10% of his revenue.
Absolutely. And I've seen it actually be more than that. Yes. Yes.
Mm.
That's a lesson that I'm unfortunately that he didn't realize that he had to learn that. And unfortunately he learned that lesson. But there are ways, if you look at that, my second point here is discuss opportunities to control or drive cost of insurance down. My goal when I come into work for a contractor, I look at it as I am their employee. Me and my team go to work for them, and my whole job is to paint a pretty picture to the underwriter to drive their cost of insurance down. That's my goal. That's kind of taboo, I guess you would say. Sometimes in my industry, you would think that you would want to drive the cost of insurance up, and that's not the case for me and how I do things. I want happy clients for 20, 30 years as opposed to a client for 1 year and then not anymore. So if that makes any sense.
Very much. Dennis, again, just answering the question, what is the one thing that you wish you would have known early on? That it's even needed.
It's even needed. Yes, yes, absolutely. Insurance is once again a risk that you don't want to use. You don't want that means if you used it, something bad has happened. But praise the Lord that that's what we're allowed to restore what has already happened a lot of times with insurance. So I'll preface this: I'm not I'm not hey pro team insurance. That's not me. I don't like the insurance carriers no more than you do. That's what my contractors find that funny sometimes. But at the same time, I work for the contractor. My team, we work for the contractor, and we want to make sure that they're hitting their goals to go to where they want to go. But you're right, insurance is great when it's needed, and it's a pain in the butt sometimes when it's not.
Thank you so much. John, really good question. Why do I need so many separate insurance policies like workers' comp, professional liability, general liability, vehicle liability, property coverage, theft, inland marine, and on and on and on and on?
Very good. Very good. There's a little thing called exclusions. And I don't care what company, what carrier, what agent you have, there is exclusions in every single policy. So you have those different insurance policies because of the things that are excluded. For example, your general liability, your workers' comp, your inland marine. Those things they have exclusions. So you need different policies to take care of those exclusions. That way it covers you properly. That's a
Oh,
very good question. That could be a lot of times what going to the next point of what your largest frustration is with insurance is why do I have so many policies?
thank you so much. Gary is back, consulting
Okay.
arborist. How about errors and omissions? Is that necessary for consultants?
Absolutely, Gary. Absolutely. I agree with that. If you are getting the way I like to break it down, if you are getting paid for your advice, then it is absolutely necessary to have E&O insurance. Okay. And we'll get into that. That's what part of the whole slide is with the certified arborist. So very good. Y'all have some great questions here. That's what we want to continue to do is have this interactive. Okay. So feel free to stop me. Feel free to say, hey, pause, time out. I got a question here. Feel free to do that. I want this to be interactive. That way you guys get the most bang for your buck here. Okay. So we've talked about different ways to schedule your insurance. We talked about different insurance policies already. Gary's already got us 2 or 3 slides down the road, which is fantastic. I love that, Gary. So I look forward to meeting you one day. But your largest frustration with insurance, I asked several of my tree contractors this. I texted them out yesterday. individually. And hey, what is your largest frustration? They know me. They know me well. We have very good relationships. And a lot of them is they don't understand how the claims process works. A lot of their frustration comes from why do I have to do this when somebody else over here is not doing it? And you guys know who's doing things the right way, and you guys know who's doing things the wrong way. The way I like to answer that is like in a court of law. If I'm gonna have to look somebody in the eye and answer for me and my name, the same name that goes on my wife, the same name that goes with my kids, I want to be able to answer it without any gray areas. And that's unfortunate because there are going to be some people that do things the wrong way, and I can't necessarily help those people as much as people that want to do things the right way. You want to do things for the betterment of your employees, for the betterment of your company, for the betterment of your community. That's what frustrates a lot of people. So we'll move on from that, and let me know, like I said, if you have any questions whatsoever. Okay. The difference between arborist and tree service. So I don't need to explain this to you guys. This is not teaching you guys this. You guys know that. Okay. What this is based upon is there's different ways to cover that. Okay. It's not saying that one's better than the other. It's not saying that one's higher. It's not, that's not what it's saying. Okay. With the arborist, you do have a higher emphasis on education. You're knowledgeable about your biology, tree health, often consulting on how to preserve the life and growth of the tree. What I see a lot of times with the certified arborist is that you care more about the tree blossoming and into this beautiful existence as opposed to cutting it down, and which is a fantastic thing to do as well as a quality to have. So that there's just different ways, and that's what we're going to get into, is there's different ways to cover you. Okay. If you want to come in and do logging, there's different coverages for that. Okay. Which is great. Brings me back to your agent needs to understand what operations you are doing. Absolutely 100%. I have contractors all the time, you know, they joke around. Well, I probably shouldn't have said that around my insurance agent. I'm like, no, that's exactly what you should be saying around me, because we don't want to have that conversation of, hey, this is not covered. This is a surprise. I don't like surprises when it comes to insurance. I want you to know what risk you're taking, and I want you to know what you're jumping into. Okay. And that's how your agent should be doing things as well. So the difference between the arborist and the tree service and how they conduct their business has to be covered completely different. And that's what we'll dive into really quick. All right. All right. So there's 4 common mistakes when I see with insurance. Okay. A lot of time, especially with newer tree companies. Okay. There's 4 common mistakes, and some of those that you already discussed here. Okay. So not understanding your policy exclusions or limitations. What is covered and what is not. This is so huge. Okay. I had a tree contractor not too long ago, it was about a year and a half ago, come to me, and their policy that they got online blatantly excluded boom coverage. Okay. So they actually were cutting trees with a boom truck. That's the way the business had been operating for years. They never understood that that was an exclusion, though. Okay. So they're cutting with the boom truck, drops a tree on a house. This is a local Georgia company, drops a tree on a house, and it is excluded up under their insurance policy. This was before they come to me. So keep that in mind. And their biggest complaint was like, why didn't my agent know this? And so that's what you guys, that's when you hire your agent, you got to make sure that that agent is used to doing tree companies, and number 2, understands your business and what you are doing, because each one of you do a lot of very similar things. However, each one of you are different. And that's what I was going back to earlier when I said there's not a one size fits all in insurance. It has to be tailored to you specifically. Okay. So what is covered? What is not covered? Are employees covered in a regular general liability policy? No, they're not. Okay. Let's say, is your property covered on your auto policy? No, it's not. And so there's all kinds of scenarios and ways. Going back to, I forget who asked the question earlier, and I can't see it in the questions, but why do I have so many insurance policies? You have it because of this, because of the exclusions exist. Okay, so you want to be adequately covered, and going forward with that, that's why you have so many policies. Okay, the next common mistake is inadequate coverage. Just because on the truck, and I get this all the time, where we're licensed and insured. Okay, cool. There's also ghost policies for workers' comp. Why do they call it ghost policies? Because there's nobody covered. Yeah, I don't really sell those because I don't believe in them. I don't sell anything I don't believe in. And because how am I supposed to tell you, hey, you got to pay this fee for just to get a certificate? It's not covering anyone. So that's what you have to understand. Licensed and insured does not necessarily mean you have enough coverage for the risk. To the gentleman earlier that asked about minimum liability limits, this is what we're talking about here. This is what we're talking about. Inadequate coverage. For example, for just personal lines auto in the state of Georgia, the coverage is 25, 50, 25. Okay, so 25,000 for bodily injury, 50,000 per occurrence, and then 25,000 for property damage as well. Okay. How many of you have bought a truck for your company recently? Is it over 25,000? That's minimum insurance. That's what you legally have to cover. So this is what I'm telling you why minimum insurance I'm never a big fan of, because if you bought a truck over, let's say it's 50,000, a new F-250, what is that, 70,000? Then your insurance pays 25 and you come out the other 45. That's just if the truck's damaged, not to mention if the individual is hurt. Georgia's an at-fault state. So you see what I'm getting at here. Licensed and insured. That person had insurance. They were licensed to drive. That doesn't mean they had enough coverage for the risk that they had. Okay. Misclassification of employees. This is huge with tree companies. I see this all the time, unfortunately. I had one just the other day, a tree company that was a prospect of mine that I was going after for a while, and I got to look at their policies finally. And then here's what I found. Well, there's a concrete classification. That's interesting. Okay. All right, let me keep reading down here. There's an electrical classification. That's interesting as well. There's a roofing classification. That two of the three of those are some of the highest rates you could possibly have. And so I asked the client, I was like, when's the last time you done a roof? He's like, I don't know, 8 years ago. Okay, interesting. When's the last time you've done concrete? I don't know, anything 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So you mean to tell me you've been paying for this for the last 8 years, this classification? So I see this all the time, misclassification of employees. You have a guy, let's say the guy on the screen here, the climber here. He's a different classification than the guy that is in the boom truck or on the skid steer. That is, if you have a guy, let's say Bob is on the skid steer and that's all Bob does, then Bob is a different classification than the guy on that tree right there. And so we don't need to put the payrolls in the same classification. And a lot of times it can be very, very costly to a company to be misclassified. You want to do what's right. You want to do what's right. However, there's also ways around having your whole, you don't want the girl answering the phone to be in the same classification, her payroll to be in the same classification as the guy climbing the tree. That doesn't make sense. All right. My agent is my buddy. And go ahead. You got a question, Brittany? You're muted.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So John has a question in relation to what you were just talking about. What about officers and directors policy for a company to cover actions of executives or having separate owners liability or errors or omissions policies to help cover an owner beyond the company insurance policy coverages and limits?
Yes, I would ask what is that owner doing outside of, let's say, are they sitting on a board of trustees? Let's say if they, for example, I know our owner he's on the board of trustees for the Joseph Sam School, which is a special needs school here in Fayette County. So therefore, excuse me, he would need something like that because decisions made affect other people. And that's the way you want to look at that in layman's terms. If your decisions are affecting organizations and other people, not just necessarily your business, then yes, absolutely, you would need that policy. Which, and once again, we're going to get into E&O policy here in just a little bit when we talk about the difference in a certified arborist here.
Awesome. John had a quick follow-up. What risk to an owner and company is there when being insured as a lawn and landscape versus tree service or tree care?
Hmm. Quite frankly, you're probably getting cheaper rates right now. However, when there's an audit situation, especially on the workers' comp side, and I keep going back to workers' comp because that's a lot of my specialty. If you saw my name earlier, you saw CWCA behind it, which is Certified Work Comp Advisor. And so I keep going back to this because it's the easiest example I can think of. But if that person is going and doing, rephrase that question again, Brittany, please. I want
All
to make sure
right.
I'm answering it correctly.
So let's see here. And I think he sent a clarification as well. So I'll reread it and then his additional.
Yeah, I
So
just want to make sure I'm getting it right.
what risk to an owner and company is there when being insured as a lawn and
Yeah.
landscape versus tree service or tree care? But then he also followed up, separate from what I require any nonprofit organization that I am on for
Mhm.
them to get officers and directors insurance. This is about a for-profit business and that owner.
Sure. So if the simple way to answer that is if there are directors and officers at a board of trustees, yada yada yada, that type of scenario. If it's just one owner, you don't really need a directors and officers liability policy. If there are decisions for that board, then yes, I would argue that you would need that. As far as the landscaping and tree question, that's what I thought he was getting at. Is landscaping, you're probably getting better rates because it's less risk. However, if there's an audit situation, okay, there's going to be an adverse audit situation, then all of the payroll has to go to the highest category. So I've seen in this situation exact same thing with the landscaping, and they're doing tree work. They're doing tree work, or they're subbing it out and not getting insurance for their subs. They're subbing out the tree work. All of that payroll goes into the highest classification. I've seen 30,000. I've seen 60,000. I've seen 80,000. $120,000 audits. I'm dealing with a company right now that had 146,000 audit. Now we're going to try to bring that down some. This was before they were working with me because they were classified as a landscaping company. So yes, you're probably paying cheaper right now, but there's an audit coming. I can't tell you when it's coming, and they don't tell the agent when it's coming. It just kind of comes. Now normally every year you have an audit process, but as far as an adverse audit where they actually catch that, that's when you have bad problems and you got to pay it all up front.
Awesome. Thanks. John sent just a message. My questions are some of the issues that come up in property damage, personal injury, or wrongful death cases where he's an expert witness. So,
Yeah. So
uh,
that's one. I think we're like 2 slides ahead right there. But
oh,
basically, and I'll go ahead and answer that because it seems like there's a lot of those questions, which is great. If you can ever be drawn into being an expert witness, I would think you would need an E&O policy. Okay, so your general liability, if you're giving advice as far as consulting, are you getting paid for that advice, right? And are you are you changing or altering the way another company does things, then yes, you would need an extra policy. Your general liability is not can not cover that. Some general liabilities actually do, but they can, and I would say the vast majority of them do not cover that.
Thanks, Craig.
Yeah, yeah. The last common mistake I see here is my agent is my buddy. You see the follow-up question. How much are you paying this buddy? Because I have a lot of buddies that are not paying me anything. We're just actually buddies. So you got to think of it as a business. And I get it. It's your golfing buddy, your fishing buddy, this, that, and the other. He's got your best interest at heart. You might really want to have somebody take a second look, even if it is your buddy. That's okay. I see that the common mistake all the time. I've had several clients come to me. I'm like, look, everybody's happy. Everybody, even all of my clients now, were happy at one time somewhere else. Just because you're happy doesn't mean that you're covered properly. Okay. Now, when, excuse my language, but crap hits the fan, then how much is that buddy worth? If that makes any sense? So don't make that mistake whatsoever. Let's see. All right, so insurance carriers look at cranes and boom trucks differently than they do climbers. Okay, this is big. If you see the first bullet point, know your percentages. As a business owner, as say if you're a CFO, if you know you're COO or whatever, if you have some kind of title that you are dealing with financials and you're dealing with the insurance program, then know your percentages. Know what percent of jobs are climbing jobs, know what percent need boom trucks, and know what percent you use a crane. Okay, there you have no idea the underwriters that are asking me, well, how often are they climbing? And if you don't know, I don't know for sure. Your agent don't know unless you actually have this laid out. So I would suggest you really start taking inventory, is what I like to say. Take inventory here and make sure you have documented of what is what, because there are certain carriers that I represent that they will not do over 30% of climbing. Like I have certain carriers that will not do over 50% of crane work. And so for me to be able to shop that around with the carriers and have the carriers compete and really make you more attractive to those carriers, I need to know these numbers. Okay, so that even if it doesn't have to be necessarily scientifically to the decimal point, but like we need to know it's very close to this, because those tree companies are looked at differently, and I cannot stress that enough. They're looked at differently through the underwriter's eyes. Okay, so have a detailed plan with the team about which jobs need what, and you need to be able to have that document. I know that this is man, I got to write this in my manual or whatever. That the underwriters want to see. That's the whole goal here. Is to remember we talked about driving your cost down of insurance. The whole goal is to have them see you in a light that is above the rest. You want to see best in class, and this is the different ways that you can see best in class here. Okay, how high do climbers go? I have a specific national carrier that you all probably realize. I'm not going to go into this, that, and the other, but they exclude, once again, going back to the exclusions, they exclude anybody over 30 feet. That's not a boom truck. That's not a crane. But if a climber goes over 30 feet, it's excluded if something happens. And so, you know as well as I do, if you have climbers out there, they're going over 30 feet. Heck, I go 30 feet in a tree stand when I'm deer hunting. Like y'all go over 30 feet. And so it's a hard situation. And I see tree companies with this carrier, and it scares me to death, because I'm like, well, what happens if a buddy cuts the top of the tree out and it lands on the house? It's 65 foot up. That's a problem, right? Are there exclusions for cranes? There's a carrier that has exclusions for cranes. We talked about that a little bit. Workers' comp classifications should change, as well as rates. Okay, so you have your climbing guys, and one thing, if I can give you advice on this, If you have guys that climb, then have them climb. And they're invaluable. They're great. If you have a guy that operates the skid steer, then keep him operating the skid steer because you can actually classify them differently. Go ahead, Brittany.
So Kevin wants to know, how do you document the different types of jobs that you're doing? I can go back through our work log and detail the jobs, but what is an underwriter looking for in terms of documentation for ground working jobs, boom, or climbing?
Very good. Very good. So I'm the one, the agent is the one that has the majority of the communication with the underwriter. So you're be able to, is what I'm getting at, be able to portray that to your agent. Your agent should be able to portray that now, then to your underwriter. Once again, I tell contractors this all the time. We have to become very good friends really, really fast. Whether you like me or not, that's okay. I have to understand the ins and outs of your business. That's what makes me drive the cost down. That's what allows you to have more control over the cost as opposed to the insurance carrier just renewing your policy and you get an increase every year type situation and you don't know why. Well, this type of stuff, I get it where you can go back. Hey, did we use a crane on this job? Did we use a climber on this job? Who was the foreman on this job? So I get you can't go back 10, 12 years. I get that you can't go back 5 years, but try to go back as far as you possibly can in the last few months and then kind of base it upon an annual basis if you can.
Thank you.
Oh, no problem.
Oh, hold on. Sorry, I got one more.
That's all right.
And at some point, because we're already at 7:15, at some point,
Oh my goodness.
I know. John wants to know, as only a consulting arborist working as a sole proprietor, what are the minimum insurance requirement or insurance coverages I should be looking for? Workers' comp, general liability, E&O, what else and how much? I understand some of these will be follow-up conversations, but
Sure. And I'll put my information on the screen for anybody to follow up. I'll move past this cranes and the booms versus climbers continued. Brand loyalty. You see with the brand, you're like, what does that matter? It actually does matter to some underwriters and how you take care of your equipment. All this stuff is how we can help portray. So I'll move past that so we can start talking about the liability differences for certified arborists. Going back to the question I asked earlier, are you truly consulting and getting paid for that professional advice? Okay. If you are, then you do need something outside of a general liability policy, which is an errors and emissions policy. Okay. These are very actually inexpensive policies. These are not your break the bank hard policies. Your general liability is a higher policy actually, and it excludes this. Okay. So going back to the guy that asked the question, if he's a certified arborist, what policies does he need? I would say you would need general liability. Okay. Because go to the second bullet point here. What does general liability policy cover? General liability covers bodily injury or property damage from direct or indirect business operations. Okay. And then right below that, it says most general liability policies do not cover professional consulting or advice. Okay. So if I'm me as an insurance agent, I have an E&O policy because if I am telling you guys something, okay, and then you base that off of your business, and then now your business destroys somebody's property or causes bodily harm or injury because of my advice, that's a bad problem. That is not covered under my general liability. So that's why I have an errors and emissions policy. Okay. For minimum limits, honestly, in the state of Georgia, the liability climate, which we'll briefly go over here, look up the judicial hellhole report. There's actually something called judicial hellhole report. Go Dogs, Georgia, we're number one. You see what I'm getting at? Like that's because of the judicial climate right up to 85, 85, 75, any of these interstates, and you see lawyer ads after hurt on the job, hurt in a car wreck, hurt here, hurt, call me. That's what you see. and they are driving the cost of insurance, unfortunately, as opposed to you, the contractor, driving the cost down. Okay, until we get some tort reform, this is me on my little soapbox, until we get some tort reform at the Capitol in the state of Georgia, then we're here to stay number one on the judicial hellhole, and that's not a number one that we want to be. Okay, so your minimum liability limits, I would say, would be 1 million for minimum on general liability. I would say 1 million on errors and omission. We're going to talk about an umbrella policy. If you don't know what an umbrella policy is, please reach out to me. I would love to explain it to you. I'm not trying to sell you an umbrella policy. Go to your agent and ask for it. That's fine, but somebody needs to be talking to you about an umbrella policy. We're having verdicts in the state of Georgia. Just had a prospect that didn't want to hear this. Basically, when I talked to them last year, they didn't want to hear this, but they have a claim now that's sitting out there, 7 or 8 million is what they're looking at. They only have 1 million on general liability, 1 million on umbrella. Where do you think that other 7 or 8 million comes from? It's going to bankrupt the company, if not the individuals that own the company. So fortunately, okay. So that's where we're at as far as minimum. I would say million on your general liability, million on your workers' comp, minimum million on the umbrella. I'm gonna go over umbrella, how important it is to have a higher liability limit on the umbrella, as well as minimum 1 million on the auto as well. So hopefully that answers your question there. I know a lot of you guys want to talk about this liability differences for certified arborists. Okay, so if you look at the second bullet point, what does a professional liability policy cover? Okay, so this actually covers businesses or professionals if there's a mistake, if there's negligence, if there's an error in the work that you provided, if you're doing designs, architectural type work, if you're doing drawings, if you're doing any type of consulting, that's what an E&O policy covers. Once again, this is not break your bank. You could probably cut 2 trees and pay for this type of policy, depending on what you guys are charging. So trust me, I've got some quotes out there. I know what you guys are charging, but you could probably cut a few trees down realistically and pay for this policy. Is how inexpensive it is, depending on the size of your company. And now if you're a 500 employee type company, then that's going to take a lot more, right? If you have 17 certified arborists on staff, then yeah, that's going to take a lot more, right? But if you're your average small business, then this is a very inexpensive policy that it blows my mind that tree companies do not have this for how much it costs. And like I said, every company is different. But absolutely, I know several questions about people have asked if I'm a certified arborist. Now, if you're a certified arborist, and I'm gonna save you some money here. If you're a certified arborist and you just use it for your company, you're not giving anybody advice, you're not giving anybody, you just want to be the best at your craft, great. I don't think you need an E&O. And I'll go on record and say that. Hey, maybe might get slapped on the wrist for that. But at the same time, if you are consulting and advising and people are changing their plans of their business around your advice, then absolutely 1000% you need this coverage.
What if I work across state lines? Does that change things? Do I have to have separate policies for each state?
You should not. You should not. However, once again, going back to the exclusions talk, there are certain policies that exclude certain states. For example, I know of a certain carrier that it's going to exclude the state of Ohio, it's going to exclude the state of California, and exclude the state of, I think it's like Wyoming or something. I don't have very many contractors work in Wyoming, but so to answer your question, it should not. However, you need to ask your agent that, because that policy will spell it out specifically what states that they are allowing coverage to be in, especially your regional carriers.
Thank you.
All right.
And please, and tell me if I need to stop and hold questions, because the thing is that we can always answer more questions and let people go. Tim wants to know, can you get E&O from one insurer and GL from another insurer?
Absolutely, yes. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. As far as carrier wise, a lot of your E&O is going to be different carriers. Now, a lot of your some of your bigger companies like your Cincinnati's of the world, you're going to have your E&O policies. If you already have Cincinnati, then you can get an E&O policy there. But it goes back to I would think that you would want your agent walking you through this, and that's the most important. And guys, like I said, this is not a ploy about hey, come to Craig or the Harbor. That's not what this is about. I really want you guys to learn here and go back and say, hey, am I at the right fit for me? Going back to the buddy screen, am I at the right fit for me if this is not being taught to? Because we're seeing the 40, 60, $80,000 claims that are not covered up under your general liability. At that point, how good is that a buddy is that? You see what I'm saying? And it might not be his fault, but that's not necessarily what his expertise is in, which is okay, or her expertise. Let me know if you have any other questions. The umbrella climate, once again, the judicial hellhole report says that Georgia is not only best in college football for the last couple of years, but we are #1 in judicial hellhole. Can't even say it hardly. But what is your current umbrella limit? If you want to put that in the chat real quick, what is your current umbrella limit? If you don't know, I would say that's a problem. Okay, we got to address that problem. And I would, if I was you, I would find that out. What is your current umbrella limit? And Brittany will be seeing some of those. And how did you wind up at that limit? Did you decide that? Did somebody decide that? That doesn't work for your company? How did you come up with that? Where did it come up with? There's a process that I go through with my clientele that we come up with the umbrella limit together. Go ahead, Brittany.
So far, I've got 2 million.
Okay.
Anybody else want to throw that in there?
And if you're saying, hey, what is this guy talking about? What is an umbrella? What is an umbrella? Okay. Let's address that real quick. An umbrella is a liability coverage that's going to go over your auto, your general liability, and your workers' comp. Hopefully all three. Well, I'll get to that on point number 4, because you want the underlying limits to be over all three of those. So if you exhaust through $1 million of liability on your auto, then you have that umbrella that in this guy's case, it's a $2 million umbrella over top of that. So if it's a $3 million claim, that pays out, it comes nothing out of the contractor's pocket. However, if it's a $5 million claim, then the insurance company pays 1 million for auto, 2 million for umbrella, that equals 3. The other 2 million, that's on the company. Okay. Very good. We talked about the litigious climate. Does it encompass underlying coverages? Some umbrella policies will exclude auto. Some umbrella policies will exclude workers' comp. Some umbrella policies will exclude general liability. So if you exceed through the threshold of what your limits are, then it could actually be a problem if it's excluded. So realistically, you want it to cover over all three of those, and EPLI insurance as well, which we'll get in. Okay. All right. So workers' comp, top 5 claims. Okay. If you look at over on the left side of the screen, Georgia in general, just top 5 claim events in general. And this is a big thing with tree companies. You guys are not having 50 claims a year. You guys are having 2, 3, 1 claim a year, but it's for 50,000. It's for 250,000. It's for 700,000. If you get hurt in the tree industry, we're not talking about a nick. We're talking about somebody's life-threatening injuries. Okay. So if you look at Georgia in general, you got strains and sprains, falls, cuts, lacerations, repetitive motion injury, motor vehicle accident. You say, Craig, how does that make sense? Motor vehicle, you have auto insurance for that. Actually, in the state of Georgia, workers' comp is primary. So workers' comp pays out first if your employee is injured in an auto accident. Workers' comp pays out first. It's primary in the state of Georgia. Remember that. Okay. If you look at on the right side of the screen, this is where we see in the tree industry, this is where your claims are coming from. Falls from heights, falling objects. I can't tell you, I don't know why in 2023, it seems like the vast majority of my tree clients have had at least one falling object claim where there's a limb, there's a dead limb that falls. I had one probably 3 or 4 months ago, a dead limb about 30 to 40 foot away from the tree that was being cut, fell and hit an employee. It was not a part of the drop zone. I fell and hit an employee in the head, concussion. Like, it was a bad situation. Employee's all right, but these are weird things that happen in the tree industry that we're trying to mitigate against. Cuts, lacerations, electrical injuries. If you're doing any power line work or anything like that, there's all kinds of electrical injuries, and most of the time those do not turn out very well. Heat related injuries. You guys are working in the elements, in the heat. It is hot. The devil came down to Georgia and stayed here this summer. He didn't leave. It was hot. There's a lot of heat related injuries that are workers' comp claims. Okay. All right. So the workers' comp claim process, this is very, very important. Okay. You want to train your employees to report that injury immediately. Brittany, you can tell me this if somebody puts it in the chat, but does anybody know the law, the Georgia law, which they'll you just throw the book at you for? Does anybody know the law of how long you have to legally report a workers' comp claim? Does anybody know that? If you'll put it in the chat.
30 days.
30 days. Okay.
Anybody else?
Anybody else want to help? If you hear me say one thing, you hear me say this, it's not 30 days. Hopefully at least
48
one
hours.
person. How many?
48 hours.
48 hours is not 48 hours. It's 24 hours. 24 hours in the state of Georgia. Okay. I have not underwriters, but adjusters. The first question they ask me is, when was it reported? Why was it not reported on time? Sometimes I can answer those questions for contractors. Sometimes I can't. You want me to be able to answer that. Me as your agent, you want me to be able to answer that, put it that way. So you have to train your employees. It has to be reported immediately. You're like, Craig, I'm not reporting, a $200 emergency room visit that needs 4 stitches. Hey, cool. That's fine. You actually should have a deductible on your workers' comp policy. If you don't have a deductible on your workers' comp policy, it is a travesty and you're doing a disservice to yourself. Let me give you an example of one of my tree companies. Okay. That this happened to him before this is why he was looking to switch. Okay. And he came over to me. It's because something happened. They reported the workers' comp claim. All right. Something happened again to the same employee. Nothing really came out of that. He was fine. Same employee. All right. Went to the emergency room for, I think he had like 4 or 6 stitches. The contractor paid it out of his pocket, which I would assume 99% of you guys on this call would pay it out of pocket. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't let anybody tell you that there's anything wrong with that. However, they didn't report it. And so when they didn't report it, he paid it out of his pocket. The employee went back to work, right? Employee worked for another 3 months. Well, employee stops showing up for work on time. Employee stops showing up to work at all. Employee is not a very good employee anymore. Well, what happens? The business owner has to fire the employee, right? Well, he fires the employee. The next day, employee lawyers up, gets a lawyer for mishandling of a workers' comp claim to the tune of $80,000. That goes against that employee's modification number now. You don't know what modification is, we can have a separate conversation. I know I'm running out of time, but that's my point is if you don't have a deductible, because if you have a deductible, you as a contractor can still choose to pay that claim out of pocket and it not go against you. if it's below your deductible. So it's just like having a deductible in health insurance. It doesn't pay out until you meet a certain amount, right? And so if you have that deductible set on your workers' comp, let's say it's $1,000. The max in Georgia is $2,500. Let's say if it's $1,000. If it's an $800 emergency room visit, pay it out of pocket. That's fine. You're in your rights to do that, but report it within 24 hours. That way, what it does is stops that employee from coming back 3, 4, 6 months later after they're fired for not complying or not showing up on time, or God forbid they drop a tree where they ain't supposed to, right? So it keeps him from coming back because you reported it by law and you did what you were supposed to do. So that's a quick claim as opposed to letting that grow and grow and grow. The number one cause of workers' comp claims going skyrocket through the roof is delay in reporting. So please hear me say 24 hours is the report. If you don't have I can work with you and show you how to get a deductible. It's pretty simple. But to me, it's a travesty when I go into to review a contractor's policies and they don't have a deductible. It immediately concerns me of like, I know somebody's got a cut finger somewhere. Why didn't we report that? It allows you to report and not get in trouble legally, all right, or not allow claims to skyrocket on your workers' comp. Okay. Instruct your employee to seek medical treatment. Wait for the insurer. Your agent should be walking you through this. If you have a hurt employee, what my contractor just called me literally like 4:30. It's like, hey, Craig, we got somebody that got hurt today. Okay, what I want to know, what's the first thing? How bad is it? Okay, he's all right. He fell off the truck, slipped when he was getting off the grappler truck, slipped and fell, bumped his head. He's coherent. He's fine. I just wanted to let you know. Okay, cool. All right. What's the immediate next action? We need to take him to the urgent care. What? No, he's refusing treatment. Okay, if he's refusing treatment, that's fine. Then if he's refusing it, he needs to put it in writing that he's refusing treatment. Put that in writing that he's refusing treatment. Okay. Now we're still going to report it because he has a deductible. It's no harm, no foul. It's still reported in the state of Georgia. That way it can't climb up and be a big claim later. This is saving my contractor thousands of dollars down the road as opposed to having a 2.0 mod or 1.7 mod. We're keeping his mod low by having a deductible. And the first thing he did was call me because that's what I've trained him to do. That's what you guys should be doing as well. Okay. So prepare your employees for return to work. I don't care if they're washing windows. I don't care if I have one contractor we've worked with that if somebody gets hurt, they start writing thank you cards to their vendors. They start writing thank you cards to the people that buy the mulch. They start writing, Christmas card, all this stuff. You have to have a return. They watch safety videos. Pay them their full pay. Have them return as soon as possible to be around the culture that you want to create. The worst thing you can do is to have that guy sit at home and have him watch commercial after commercial after commercial of lawyers on TV saying, hey, you injured at work? Call me. It's the worst thing you could do. I'm not saying if a guy falls out of a boom truck, have him back the next day on the boom truck. That's not what I'm saying. But come up with a plan with your agent. Hey, this is how bad it is. This is where we're at. What do I need to do next? And you and your agent should be able to work through that. Okay. Here's some best practices right here. I'll go ahead and skip on. Like I said, I know I am running out of time. So or I have already run out. You got your drop zone trainings, your defined planning and job description. Man, have a plan. When you go up to the job site, have a plan of, hey, I know Bob is doing this. I know Jerry over here is doing this. Jerry's on the crane. Bob's climbing. Everybody's happy, happy, happy. Okay. Equipment check-in and check-out system. I've saved one of my, this is actually the same contractor I was just talking about with the workers' comp claim. He has his employees sign a waiver saying that I did not get hurt this week. And number two, I did not see or hear of anybody getting hurt this week. Here's your paycheck. Every week, he pays his employees weekly. every week on Friday, when they come to get their paycheck, he gives them a hand paycheck. He's kind of old school like that. When he gives them their hand paycheck, they sign saying, I did not see anybody get hurt and I myself did not get hurt. How many lingering claims do you think we have now where 4 months, 6 months later, the employee comes back after he's been fired and say, oh, I was hurt, but nobody did anything about it. That's washed out. We've saved him a ton of money on his workers' comp insurance because of that. Okay. Rope safety trainings, PPE gear, saw training. Y'all, this is all stuff that y'all are already doing. Document it. That way you can tell your agent, that way your agent can take it to the underwriter to negotiate down your cost of insurance. Okay. These are all things that you guys are already doing. Why not get credit for it? Why not get your discounts that you should have for doing this stuff? You got new chaps, then you need to tell your agent you got new chaps. Hey, cool. I can now go to my underwriter and say, man, they just bought all brand new chaps. That believe it or not, that stuff actually helps. Okay. Brittany, I saw you come up and I was in my zone. I was like Ricky Bobby right there. Like, don't come up at me, Susan, while I'm signing autographs. You know what I mean? So
I know I went away. I just wanted to make sure to tell everybody, and I dropped it in the chat, as long as Craig's willing to share information, sharing. But for those of you who have to run, I dropped the CEU sign-in in the chat,
yeah.
So that you can do that.
And I'm so sorry I got long-winded. I get passionate about helping people. And so I told you before we even started, I was like, I'm not going to be but like 20 minutes. And then I lied to you. So sorry.
But dude, man, you have so many questions. So there's a bunch of questions in the chat that are buried. Again, when you attend these events, it's super important to put it in the Q&A so I even know where it's at. But you've got 11 questions. Do you want to try to address those? Of course, anybody who needs to go, you have your CEU sign-in sheet, you're free to go. Do you want to try to address those, or do you want me to make a list for you?
I will leave that up to you. If you want to make a list, I will sit there and go through every single question and type it out in writing, whatever's best. If we want to go through it right now, then hey, then I'm good as far as you are. So
all right, let's see here. Let me see if any more are coming in. Well, you're getting a lot of compliments. Everybody's super happy. Put his email in the chat. All right. I'm gonna send that out. It's there on the screen right now, but at least
if you send me a question, preface who you are. And hey, I attended this webinar. My name is Bob. Like, don't just send me an email saying, hey man, this, that, because I get emails all the time. So I would love to answer it though. Just let me know who you are. I'm a very personal, relational person. So
and why don't I do this? Let me invest the time after this, once everybody logs off, to jot down everyone who did not have their questions answered, and I can put you two in touch.
Absolutely. Perfect.
Yeah. All right. Great feedback, everybody. I'm going to go ahead. Aw, that's amazing. Everybody enjoyed it. I'm going to go ahead and steal back the host.
All right. Hey, thank you guys so much for having me. It was a blessing, and hopefully you learned something. Once again, the screen's gonna get a little bit prettier now that Brittany's taking control back. So hopefully your night just only gets better from here. Put it that way. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. Don't leave me yet until I figure out how to take back control. Right. I'm not used to this many questions, like this many things going on. So I'm like, wow, impressive, Craig. Well, thank you so much, Craig. I have stolen back host. So thanks for joining us. And I'll follow up with all these questions that are unanswered and put you guys in touch with each other. Okay. I've already had several requests to send introductions. So I've started on that while we were talking.
Okay. All right. Well, y'all have a wonderful, blessed and wonderful night, and signing out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Craig. Have a good night. For all of you still on, I am sticking on just so that I can address any questions about the CEU sign-in sheet. Make sure all of you are able to do it just fine. If I can find the chat window again, but I am here. Bear with me just a moment. There it is. All right. So glad you guys all enjoyed it. Amazing. Oh, thanks so much. All right, I'm going to stick around just a little bit longer while I wait. Of course, once you're done, just go ahead and log out so that I know you don't have any, lingering questions for me. Otherwise, I'm just going to sit here and take down all your information so I can intro you to Craig to answer any questions that were not addressed. And of course, if we need to have a follow-up, I'm sure he'll be welcome to come back. I know, Warren, right? John, that sounds so great to hear. I love that you loved the program. We do our best. Please, of course, when you're filling out your CEU form, definitely give us your feedback and what you want to hear in the future, because we do our best to give you what you want. All right, I got a few of you left. I've got Warren, Steve, Salim, Robert, Michael again, and Jason Damon, Dennis Downs. All of you guys doing okay with the CEU sign-in sheet? And of course, as promised, if your question wasn't answered, I'll stick around a little longer to take notes so I can introduce you to Craig. Thanks, Salim. All right, so those of you left, I've got 5 of you left. Is it just because you forgot to exit, or do you have any questions for me before I end this? All right, I'm not hearing any questions, so I am going to end it here in just a moment. But I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera while I take note of all of you who need follow-up.